I would just like to, first of all, continue the discussion we had in the excellent first session by moving from electrons to molecules. So a significant part of my time is now dedicated to molecules. However, the first session discussed flexibility, which is somehow the umbrella for power sector decarbonization, which is somehow where I'm coming from at IRENA. And the two things are not mutually exclusive, as we heard in the first session. It was an excellent segue to this session, the conclusion that we heard. So we do need both, and both have synergies. So hydrogen as a source of flexibility, hydrogen as a way to decarbonize end-use sectors, and it all fits under an increased uptake of electricity from 17–20% today to 50% plus hydrogen production. So next slide, please. So this comes from the Global Renewables Outlook that Ricardo presented in the first session. A few key points here. First of all, not to forget energy efficiency. And energy efficiency doesn't only mean reduction in consumption, but also shifting to sources of consumption that can be electrified easily or can be fed with hydrogen. I will have a couple of words on this a bit later on, but a simple example, moving from natural gas to heat pumps is one, and another one is moving from blast furnaces to direct reduction of iron ore through green hydrogen. So the chart at the bottom comes from an earlier report at IRENA where we identified challenges in decarbonizing the so-called hard to decarbonize sector, and we see hydrogen as the key together with bioenergy to decarbonize those sectors. Next slide, please. This is a brief timeline of our work on hydrogen in the last 2 years. So we released 3 reports on the topic, 2 dedicated to hydrogen and 1 released last week dedicated to end-use sectors and reaching zero with renewables. Key point there is that hydrogen becomes increasingly important in the so-called last mile to reach zero emissions. And the key technology that was identified in the work with our member countries to realize competitive green hydrogen jointly with renewable power is electrolyzers, and we will release towards the end of October a new report on this topic. In parallel, we've been working with our member countries in sharing information and knowledge on this topic, identifying key priorities and challenges for the scale-up of green hydrogen. So we started with a session of Innovation Week 2 years ago, and we will have 6th of October the next session. Now the topic has been mainstream and hydrogen is somehow in all sessions looking at end uses, but also we have a dedicated session at the moment with almost 1,000 people registered, where we will discuss electrolysis and e-fuels. In addition to this, we had a few thematic meetings with our members. The last one was a ministerial roundtable in January this year, where CEOs from private sector discussed with ministers from our member countries, and the call from the members was to continue this dialogue, and for that we established a collaborative framework in June, and we're having a meeting next week to further increase the collaboration and knowledge sharing. Next slide, please. So this again comes from the Global Renewables Outlook that Ricardo mentioned earlier. I would say just 3 numbers to focus our attention on. To get to where we need to get by 2050, we need at least 19 exajoule of green hydrogen by 2050. We need to bring down the cost from today, so say between $4 and $8 a kilogram, to between $1 and $2 a kilogram. This is significant, but the renewable electricity costs from the largest projects we see around the world today are already in line with this objective. What we need to bring down is the cost of electrolyzers, and we're working on that and discussing that with our members and with industry. Also because we are discussing a market of a few tens of megawatts today, with probably a production capacity of about 2 gigawatts maximum a year at the moment, and we need to deploy 1,700 gigawatts by 2050. So some of these will be already retired between now and 2050. So we need a production capacity that is several orders of magnitude larger than what it is today. And very important point, on which I close the slide, is that we need at least 7,500 terawatt hours of renewable electricity to produce the green hydrogen we need in this scenario. And to get to zero, this probably will be significantly more. And so only deploying electrolysis without scaling up the associated renewable generation is clearly a topic of key discussion at the moment. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the fact that renewable electricity is already in line in the best projects with what we need to get to a competitive green hydrogen. And this is our latest report on renewable power generation, showing the cost decrease of key renewable technologies over the last decade. So this is clearly, as Rana was showing, the part of the energy transformation that is on track. When it comes to hydrogen, next slide, please. We need to repeat this experience that we have for power generation, and this can be really related to a lot of other enabling technologies, from power grids to flexibility sources, battery storage. So generation is now extremely competitive from renewables. What we need is the rest of the system to follow suit to make an operable and competitive system in an holistic perspective. So in the case of hydrogen, there is the hydrogen infrastructure, all the logistics, of course, that have to come with that, the end uses. But of course, a key point is to go from the electricity to the molecules. And this is why we're focusing on electrolysis this year. In the upcoming report, there will be a few different angles from which we look at it, but essentially is the potential for scale up and cost reduction. That's the main objective to be achieved. In parallel, I think one word on flexibility. There are many sources of flexibility that can contribute to the decarbonization of the power sector. But if there is one place where electrolysis can play an important role, is to achieve the so-called last mile. Here in Germany, we call it the Dunkelflaute. So there is a part of the year where we might not have sun and wind available, and that's the so-called adequacy challenge in the power sector. And this is where green hydrogen can play an important role to complete the flexibility picture. Next slide, please. And this is the conclusion when it comes to cost. So we are seeing the best case cost of hydrogen from electrolysis with renewable power about $3.50 today. If we can tap into the very best resources, this can go down to about 2.5. What we need to do is to go from 2.5 down below 2 towards 1.5 and 1 if possible. So the renewable power costs we see today for the best projects are already getting us there. We need to bring down the cost of electrolyzers. And at this point, I will just go towards the conclusion in the interest of time, and I will skip the next slide. If you can go 2 slides forward, please. So I mentioned the collaborative framework on green hydrogen that we established in June this year. Next meeting next week. Key points to mention. IRENA members identified a few areas of priority for knowledge sharing. One is really tracking the progress, a database on projects. We are already working on that in the context of our upcoming report. Another one is to increase collaboration with existing hydrogen initiatives. There is quite a momentum on the topic of hydrogen around the world, many initiatives, many events. We would like to try to contribute to, let's say, consolidating a bit the conversation and have a bit more impactful and more limited number of these conversations. Nexus with renewables, very important point. I already spoke about it earlier. And also the importance of scaling up the infrastructure. Would it be the green hydrogen backbone with pipelines discussed in Europe, or shipping of hydrogen, which at the moment is still unclear if it's going to be liquefied hydrogen, ammonia, organic carriers, or others. Standards and regulatory frameworks are a key point, and sharing of best practices on financial mechanisms. And then I'll conclude with the next slide. where is an invitation to all of you to participate in another used to be physical event in Bonn, the IRENA Innovation Week, which is taking place 5th to 8th of October. It's the 3rd edition and the first virtual edition. Again, this can allow participants from all over the world to join. We are going to have a dedicated session on hydrogen on the 6th of October, 8 to 11 a.m. Central European summertime. And the link below allows you to have a free registration, so you're welcome to join. We already have a significant number of people register, even more than what we can do in person. So we look forward to having many of you joining this event. And with this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.